517 cubic inches. Look at the time, 8:25 for Fisher. He has that pink Chevelle really cooking.
I mean, we all kind of know the beginning. We all kind of generally know how the story goes, but there's a lot of things that people don't know beforehand, because really you didn't come onto the scene until you had the Flowmaster car. So what was it like, during street racing and before that? What was it like being a kid growing up in the 70s and 80s? What was it like before you had street racing growing up as a kid? What was your life like?
Well, I can tell you that what was different about, for me, is I had nobody that influenced me to get into cars. Like a lot of people had their dad. Their dad raced before, and they would go to the racetrack with their dad, and their dad influenced them into cars, working on cars. And my dad had like zero interest. He didn't care about racing cars or nothing. I mean, period, nothing. And as a kid, what was everywhere was garage bands. That was like a 70s deal, is that everybody have a garage band. I can remember the Doobie Brothers playing down the street to the left, and then you'd hear other 70s bands playing down the road. It was like you could almost go to your own rock concert, and that was my influence, and that's what got me into music. And I always thought, wow, how cool is that? And I went and got a guitar and started playing a guitar. But then at the same time, I'm seeing all these hot rods driving up and down my street. I lived on a main thoroughfare, and I always thought, well, those are pretty cool cars, But then I thought, that's a lot of money. I couldn't afford that, because I was a little kid, I was like 12, 13 years old, mowing yards, buying guitars, buying guitar strings, and I thought, man, that's all the money in the world, There's no way I could afford a car. I'm going to have a bicycle to go anywhere. And which was, my area was not rich kids. Everybody was broke. And anybody who had transportation was either on a bicycle or a motorcycle. And so I couldn't see myself being on either one of those. I'm thinking, man, I'm going to have to figure out something, mow more lawns. And so after I got a little bit older, I figured out when I was 14, I thought, man, I gotta think about having a car, because I need to get around. I need to go to school. I don't want to be riding a bus. That's a bummer. So then I started getting the Auto Trader for different reasons other than what I was getting it for before. Like the Bargain Trader and the Auto Trader was our biggest communication thing between marketing, advertising. All these people would be selling their stuff on all these different magazines. And I started looking at cars a little bit more and more. And I thought, well, I just need to get me some transportation. And my dad goes, save up some money, we'll get you a new car instead of you having to be getting an old car. A lot of my friends would get old cars and they'd be breaking down all the time. And I thought, man, I don't want to be a part of that. And so when I was in school, I got on this work program that I could leave school early and go to work. And my first real job was Chick-fil-A. And so here I'm working at Chick-fil-A, saving up every penny that I can. And I think I saved myself up. Now, you got to remember, this is back in 79, 78, and I saved up $1,800. And back then, $1,800 is a lot of money. $1,800 today is a drop in the bucket. But I took that $1,800 and we went to the Chevrolet dealership. In 1980, I turned 16 and went and got a brand new 1980 Camaro stick shift car, and had a V6. It was a 231 Chevrolet. It was Chevrolet's answer to the 231 Buick. This was a 231 Chevrolet motor, V6. Looked like a Chevrolet V8, just missing 2 cylinders. And it had a 3-speed on the floor. It was really a cool car. Drove it to school, and I was like the hottest thing on the planet. All the women, I was like only kid there with a brand new car. And so women before that wouldn't even look at me are now actually talking to me. And I thought, wow, this is what a car will do for you. I thought this was too cool. I need a second job, make more money. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And And so that was something different. And I left Chick-fil-A and got me a job working at Red Lobster, working at nights after work. After school, working at night. And I met a guy there. His name was Dave Pollock. And he had the most beautiful, the most gorgeous 73 Camaro. It was maroon. The interior was all perfect. The motor was perfect. And I had a big ass Lopen camshaft. And I was like, now that is cool. Still, I did not know anything about racing. All I knew was that was a cool looking car. And so one day I'm talking to him about cars and racing. I said, hey, after work, I want you to take a look at my Camaro. And, he went and looked at it, and we're standing around talking about it. And I said, man, I want to make my car like yours. And he's just like looking at me, shaking his head, go, you're wasting your time. You need to get yourself an older car. This is a brand new car. You can't be tearing this thing up. He goes, you just need to sell it and go get yourself something older so you won't feel bad tearing it up. And I thought, man, that's a bummer. But I didn't think anything about the women's side of it because I thought women were like me. And I found out that I was wrong. And so one day I got lucky. Of course, I thought I got lucky. And my dad came up to me and he goes, hey, listen, I've got this guy that's got a 68 Chevelle. And it's an older car. It's a 68. It's got a couple of 100,000 miles on it. It's pretty beat up. We don't know what we're going to do with it. And I said, hang on a minute before you get too crazy. How about I get this and I'll give you my Camaro and you just take over the car payments? Because back then the car payments were like taking every penny I had. So he got the car, I got the Chevelle. Not knowing what I had no clue what a 68 Chevelle was. I just knew it was a big car and had a 307 with a Powerglide in it. And I just knew that when I put it to the floor, everybody poo-pooed the 307. Oh, the 307's a piece of crap. And it's just like, well, it may have been a POS, but I'm going to tell you, that thing ran really good. I was really impressed. And I guess because the Powerglide, when it went from, 1-to-1 gear ratio to the first gear ratio, man, that made that car take off. And I thought, this is really cool. And so I went back to Dave and I go, guess what? I got this old beat up Chevrolet. It's got some 307 motor in it. And I'm ready, man. Let's make this thing cool. And he goes, you want to make a show car or you want to race? And I said, I want to be like you, man. You're going out to these places that I never even heard of before. And you're racing, some bridge. I don't know. You said you go to some bridge and race. I don't know anything about this. And he's like, he goes, man, no small block's going to be running in that car. That's a Chevelle. That thing's a tank. You're going to need a big block. And I go, a big block? What the hell? Why do I need a big block? Why can't I just take what I got? I mean, it's 307. I mean, everybody jumps up and down about 327s. I'm only missing 20 cubic inches. How much different can it be? He said, no, you don't understand. Well, long story short, I learned more and more about racing and cars, and I followed him out to Gandy Bridge, and I was just like, wow, what a different world this is. I mean, you'd go to Gandy Bridge, and it'd be 12 o'clock at night, and you'd be on the St. Pete side, and man, there'd be like 1,000 people there. I mean, it was incredible, and it was crazy. And a lot of people hanging out, talking crap about racing and wanting to race. Some people wouldn't race, and it was an interesting experience, all the different people that was out there. And then we went to another place that was called Airport Road. And Airport Road was another crazy place. I mean, I could remember back when I was 15 years old, I had absolutely no clue what racing was. I mean, my idea of racing is what I saw on TV, and it was cars just going around and around in a big circle, roundy round, or NASCAR. I didn't even understand drag racing. And when somebody took me to Airport Road and showed me what Airport Road was, I was like, what is this? How you can't race on, I mean, the cars are just going straight, don't you got to come back and go back around again? I mean, how do you do that? I don't see no cars coming back. I didn't understand it. It didn't make any sense to me. And then finally, We come around the corner and he shows me this whole place. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This place is absolutely mobbed. When you thought there was 1,000 people at Gandy, there'd be 5,000 people at Airport Road. And the craziest thing that I ever seen in my life is when I came around the corner to go down, like as if we were going to race, but that's the only way we could get in to actually go park so we could watch the race. Some guy's sitting there with a homemade Christmas tree in a lawn chair, you know, and he's sitting there with this homemade device that he's making these lights come down. And I thought, that's insane. That thing's made out of wood. I said, you got to be kidding me. This is like, you know, a street. Everybody's racing at this street. And all these cars are going up and down the road. I was just like, this is crazy. And there's so many people here. I mean, it was just everywhere. And we would leave there and drive down Columbus to the end of the road, which would be Dale Mabry. And right across the street as you're crossing the road would be Burger King. And Burger King was in the same parking lot as Kmart. And the Kmart parking lot was massive. And that parking lot would be 3/4 full of people. You couldn't get into Burger King. If you thought you wanted to eat something, guess what? You're parking your car way out in the Kmart parking lot and you walked to Burger King to get if you wanted something because you were not driving in there. It wasn't happening. It was just too many cars. It was pretty insane. And I mean, there'd be like 5,000 people between the Kmart parking lot and Airport Road, and there'd still be people out at Gandy. I could remember getting out of my car in the Kmart parking lot, and as I'm getting out, here comes this Roadrunner pulling up next to me, and the dad's getting out of the driver's side. The passenger door opens up, and here comes the two kids out of the passenger side. And they both get out, and there's another one of their friends over there, and they said, one of the friends asked him, he says, where'd you come from? He goes, I just came from Gandy. And he goes, oh, was there a lot of people there? He goes, no, the place was practically empty. There couldn't have been more than 1,000 people there. It's like, what? I'm thinking 1,000 people and the place is empty? That can't be the case. I mean, you look at this place. This place was loaded with people. I mean, it was just insane how many cars there was.
Yeah, so needless to say, the racing overtook what you were thinking about doing with music.
Well, the music was cool, and I really liked it. It was, you know, I liked the electronics part of it, you know, because I dealt with amplifiers and speakers, and I was blowing speakers out and repairing them, and it was just, you know, lights and just messing with stuff. Electronics, I think that was a big part of it for me, you know, because I'd take my guitar apart and I'd put it back together. I just thought it was fun, and so it was a lot to it, just not only the music part, but I think what took me over on the car part was because the mechanics of it. I liked getting into stuff and fixing it, and if it broke, I liked figuring out what happened. It was just it was just the technology of the car and trying to figure out how to make things work. How did it work? You know, learning.
Right. So Pollock basically was the one that kind of guided you through your first steps of racing, or was there someone else that was involved too?
It was mostly him. I mean, you know, hanging out with him, racing with his car. We would go to Bradenton, race in his car. We'd go Sunshine Drag Strip. We'd go there, race in his car, and seeing him race inspired me to race. And I knew I had to get a different motor if I was going to be competitive at all. And I was lucky enough through friends, somebody introduced me to, you know, the mechanics teacher over at Lato, and he was into racing, you know, into cars, and he had a small block 400 that was in his Carmen Ghia that he built. It was a chassis car, and he had big tires in the back. It was a street car, and he wanted a different motor, so I bought the short block, and he had a set of 1970 Impala heads. He goes, you're going to like these heads. He goes, these are very unique heads. They only were made 1 year, and they were 194 intake and 160 exhaust from the factory, and they only came on the 4-barrel 400s. And I was like, okay, That's cool. You know, and he goes, here, let's figure out a camshaft. And he gave me a big old loping ass camshaft. And I thought, okay, looks good to me. So he got me the cam. We've got these heads. We just lapped the valves in. We threw this motor together. I got a dual plane Edelbrock intake. And he goes, you got to run this carburetor. And it was a 780 vacuum secondary. And I didn't know anything. I was like, okay, that's cool. Vacuum secondary. What does that mean? He goes, you could put it to the floor, the two barrels will open up, and when it goes out a little bit, the vacuum's going to take over, and it's going to open up the secondaries, and that car is going to take off. But at least it won't boil the tires when you're trying to take off. I was like, okay, you know, I had no clue. I put that all together like he said. I had Mark Shakespeare, which was another racer who gave me a little bit of influence. He was on John's Road Storage. He had a big shop there, and he built me a Turbo 350 with a shift kit, and he says, you got to have this torque converter. This came out of a Corvette. This was a factory stall converter. I was like, okay, that's cool. You know, I mean, I'm just listening to all these people, you know, with their input, you know. And, but I had one problem left. I had a 10 bolt in the car, and it had a 308 gear in it. So I could put it to the floor, and I could drive this car like if I was on the salt flats. So I'd be doing 300 mile an hour with that 308 gear. So I knew I had to make a change on that. And I found a 12 bolt, and I went to Mark again. I said, Mark, I need a gear. And he goes, look, all I got's this 456. And I said, I'll take it. You know, I didn't know, you know, what that was going to be like. And so he puts that 456 in there. He goes, that thing's going to run like a raped ape for the first 500 feet. He goes, maybe 8th mile. Because after that, you're going to start running out of motor because you don't turn that motor hard enough. And you got that short little street tire, you know. It wasn't no big slicks or anything. So he says, you're going to be in trouble. Which I said, it don't matter. Maybe I'll work on it later or something. But let me tell you, that 456 and that 400 small block, that Turbo 350, oh my God. That car hauled ass. And I mean, it hauled. Now, I couldn't make it to the quarter mile. That was for sure. Because when I took it to Bradenton, it was short. But for the first 8th mile, that thing ran good. And that was a lot of fun.
So you mentioned, you know, that you dumped the newer Camaro for the Chevelle, and I know that you've told me before that this thing was not a good-looking car. It was beat up. It had dents. The paint was missing in patches. The interior's tore up. So all the people that were freaking out that you had a brand new 1980 Camaro, what was their reaction seeing you go from that to a car that was almost 20 years older and beat up?
All the guy friends were loving it. They're like, hell yeah, man, high five. You know, you got something that's cool here. You know, everybody liked riding in it, you know. But the women, I could remember one girl I was hanging out with, and you know, her and I worked together in the same place. Back then it was Food World. And so I came in at my regular scheduled time, and she was the cashier. I was the bag boy. And I walked in and I said, hey, how's it going? She goes, what happened to your car? Is it getting fixed or something? Somebody loaned you that thing out there? I was like, no, that's the car. That's my new car. And her face just, I mean, it just like big droop, you know, like, oh my God, you know, what are you talking about? And I told her, I said, listen, you know, that was a cool car and everything, but that car out there in the parking lot that you're looking at right there is cooler. She didn't believe me. She thought I was lying. And I told her, I said, no, you don't understand. That car is cooler. Wait till you go for a ride with me in the car. And she's like, I wouldn't be caught dead in that thing. That thing's nasty looking from here. Because it was out in the parking lot. You got to understand, this thing was like almost camouflage, because part of it was green, and because that was the original color, and had some rust on it. And some areas I sanded some of the rust off, and of course what I do, I go spray primer on it, and we ran out of the gray primer, and I had to go get primer. And that guy at the store who had an auto parts store at the end of our road only had red primer. I was like, well, shit, I need something because I don't want this thing rusting. So here I had a little bit of red, a little bit of gray, a little bit of green. I mean, it looked like I was ready for war. And so it didn't look very appealing, but it drove good and it was fast, but she didn't like it. So guess what? I was on my own.
Right. I think a lot of people would say that was the appropriate response. Um, so obviously Dave was the the first person that you were involved in, but there were others that were involved in street racing too that obviously you met through people who were friends of friends of friends, and you know the circle just grows and grows and grows. You know, who were they and what kind of cars did they have as compared to like what you had?
Well, one person I met, I heard a lot about, through Dave, because Dave had a lot of friends, in the racing world, and one of the people that he says, oh, you got to meet Dave and I guess it was Dave and Dave, or I can't remember his friend's name, but you got to meet these guys, and we'll go out to Airport Road during the day, and we're going to run our cars, just kind of testing. And I was like, all right. So we went out there, and I remember here's this 67, I think it was, Camaro, and he had a 4-speed in it at the time, and he just dumped the clutch in that thing. That whole car just rose straight up like an elevator, and I mean just boiled the tires and took off. And I was like, wow, that was the first 4-speed car I ever seen that would run like that. Typically people had automatics, very few people had 4-speeds. I mean, there's a few, but not that many. And he had the first nitrous kit. He kept talking about nitrous because nitrous just started making his debut, and he had the Marvin Miller nitrous kit, which was like, okay, this is the brand new deal. This is the deal to have, And he had this Marvin Miller nitrous kit on there, and I was like, okay, and he ran that, and he would race the car and take it to Gandy and race it. And that was a person that I met through Dave, which was Dave Boger, and he ran his Camaro there. And then I met some other people. I remember Hal. He had a 69 GTO that was black, beautiful car. He had a 4-speed in it, 400 Pontiac motor, and that was a beautiful car. And he'd raced that also. I could remember there was a car out at Gandy. They used to call the Gandy Oldsmobile, and that car was very hard to beat. That car hauled ass. Then there was another guy that they called the Gandy Mustang, and that car hauled ass. That was interesting. There was a lot of cars. I raced a guy out there one time with a '55 Chevy. I even raced the Mustang. I raced a bunch of cars out there and had a lot of fun. Met a lot of people.
Yeah, and then yeah, that you had Brent. Brent was out there.
I met Brent through some friends. There used to be a guy that had a machine shop. It was Zorian, and that's where I kind of met Eddie Garlitz, and Eddie and
Yeah, Eddie's the nephew of Don.
Don Garlitz, yeah. And so he worked there with Brent. They both worked there, and Zorian was big into performance engines and racing. And so I met Brent, and Brent was a racer. He was like, a dedicated racer, and I mean he lived for racing. He was big in the Novas, and I remember he would always have different cars. He was trading in and out of cars all the time, kind of like Emo. Remember, I was telling you about Emo. He would trade in and out of cars too. He had everything on the planet. But Brent and I became really good friends, and Brent was big into Brent was a very technical minded person, and he kind of researched and studied and understood the mechanics of an engine and cylinder heads, and he built a set of cylinder heads for his car that eventually I ended up with, and I put them on my 400. And I think that was one of the reasons why my 400 ran so good, was because of his heads that he developed. And he made the intake work with the right camshaft, with the right heads. And I think that's the reason why that thing made so much power. It's just a lot of innovation from him.
Yeah, we talked about Emo. That's not his real name. His real name's Guillermo, but he has currently a Vega. Yeah. He's still out there racing, but he's most known for owning the Vega. and you told me one time he ended up with one of your motors.
Yeah, he got. I had some engine damage, and I needed to get to work. And he goes, "Hey, I got a deal for you. I'll trade you this perfectly good 327 for that dead, broke down 400 small block that's in your car that won't take you to work, but mine will, and I'll help you swap." I was like, all right. So we swapped motors, and I got to go to work, and he took my 400 and fixed it. And he put that in that Vega, and he took me for a ride in it, and I was like, oh my God, now I understand what a heavy Chevelle's like. Because this Vega didn't weigh nothing. And that 400 small block made that car move, and I was really impressed how much of a difference it was compared to being in a big heavy boat like that Chevelle compared to that Vega that was super light.
Right. And that was all during the first Chevelle. You know, you had that era. There was other people too, like Orlando, who was still around racing.
Orlando was later on, because during that era, I didn't know Orlando at that time, but that became more of the second Chevelle that I got, because that first Chevelle I sold, and then I bought a '69, which I didn't even like. I got rid of it. I was out of racing for a little while, and then I found this Chevelle sitting on Waters Avenue at a USAVE parking lot, wanting $600 for this thing, and I said, I gotta have it. And I went and looked at it, and it was a 6-cylinder with a 3-speed. It used to be a 3-speed on the column, and somebody converted it, made a 3-speed on the floor. And I thought, well, what the hell, I want it anyways. And I was just driving this Monte Carlo. That was a nice, decent car, got me around and stuff. And I bought this thing, and I drove it. And I loved having a stick shift. It was a lot of fun to drive, barking the tires. And I'm going to tell you, it was a 6-cylinder, but it was a 256 cylinder that had a lot of torque, and it ran good. Didn't have much top end, but man, I tell you, it had a lot of bottom end and torque, and it ran good, and I liked it. And that was the second Chevelle that I owned. That's actually the car that turned into the Flowmaster car.
Right, the one that eventually became the Flowmaster car. Yeah. So you had this friend circle, and what did those interactions look like? Because I know a lot of people talk about how they used to shop hop. They used to go from one person's garage to the other and talk, socialize. Well, then the thing was, well, let's all get in the car and let's go to the speed shop, and then.
That's the thing. That's like in that first era Chevelle, that when I was hanging out with Pollock and stuff, we'd be street racing, and it'd be like a Monday night through Thursday night. I'd go to Dave's house, and I'd be like, "What are we doing?" He goes, "Hey, let's go to John's Road," and John's Road was just one huge storage facility and they allowed you to have businesses in there. And he goes, "Let's go talk to Scotty." There'd be a guy named Scotty there. And he goes, "Let's go talk to Mark Shakespeare. Mark's got a shop there." And Mark had a couple of shops out of that place. He had one that kept his business, and one had kept cars in and stuff. And he built and worked on race cars, people's race cars. Mark had a lot of race cars, and he worked on a lot of race cars for other people. And he built a lot of fast cars, and he had a lot of knowledge, rear ends, transmissions, motors, and he was young for back in the day, and he had a lot of knowledge, and he did a lot of stuff for me and a lot of stuff for my friends. But we would go from shop to shop. We would go see some of the people's names I can't even remember, but it was actually, if you went to the back of the shop, there was Dave White Racing that did Porsches, and right across the street from Dave White was Connie Swindle. And when I went in there one day just to see him, because I figured, this guy, he's famous, I got to go talk to him just so I can say I talked to him. And he and I talked for the longest time. He was literally building a top fuel dragster, and he had the I-beam in his garage. It went from one end of the shop to the other. There was a door on each side, and it took up both ends. almost touching the doors, and he's building a top fuel dragster, telling me all about it. He had pictures on the wall of Don Garlits and him with Don Garlits telling me stories about swamp rat numbers, and I mean just everything. It was very interesting to talk to him, but and it's sad he's gone because, you know, the memories and the stories and all that's gone too. But
Definitely. So what was mainly the difference between like the first and the second Chevelle? Were there any improvements from one to the other, or was it really just like, I'm just going to stick with what I had before and just keep going with it?
well, the biggest thing is because I was younger and I didn't have no money. And when I got older, you know, I got a job that actually paid some money. So I was able to build a better motor, better transmission, and a better rear end. Everything was more synchronized, you know, to where it worked together better. And it was a cool car. I mean, it ran really good. I can remember driving it to Bradenton. Me and Greg Stevens went out there. This is on the second car. We went out to Bradenton. He drove his Nova. I drove my Chevelle from Tampa to Bradenton, and I was like scared to death because I'm thinking, oh my God, this thing's going to break down any minute or something's going to go wrong. And it ate gas like you wouldn't believe. I mean, it was insane how much gas it burned getting there. But we got there and we raced our cars. We went down the track. I was able to run the jetting, and I did not realize how lean the motor was running, because when I first went out there, the thing was running like a 13.0, and I was like, oh, is that it for a street car? I guess it's not bad. And luckily we brought some jets with us, and the plugs were like, I mean, they like brand new. And I was like, is this good? And they're like, no, you need some color on those plugs. So we kept adding fuel, and it kept getting faster and faster. Next thing I know, I was going 1020s. And I was like, I mean, I was knocking off like 500s at a time. Just every time I make an adjustment, I'd go out and go faster. I was like, this is crazy. I never, you know, you actually got to see the clock, you know, and making progress. I mean, the dyno that I had before to tell if the car was going faster was having my girlfriend in the car, and I would be on Gun Highway. She'd be sitting in the passenger seat, and I'd say, okay, get ready. I need you to tell me if this feels faster than the pass I did earlier on the street. And I would have this thing in first gear, and I'd stab it, and this thing would, and I'd shift it because I had a B&M quick click, and then I'd hit it in third gear. You know, after it's all over with, I'm looking at, you know, person with big eyes and goes, so how was that? A little bit faster than it was last time. Are you sure it was better? And that was how I could tell. So now I'm going to the track and I can see the times, and it's like, yeah, now that's probably better for tuning. Instead of asking somebody's opinion, does the car pull harder this time than it did last time? That could be the difference of sand being on the street, you know? Right.
Yeah. So, so out of all the experiences that you had, what do you think was the most fun experience doing street racing?
Fun is winning. You know, when you're in high gear and you realize you're doing like 150 mile an hour and you look over to the right and nobody's there because he's in your rearview mirror. That's the fun. You know, I mean, I don't know. There was some funny times. I mean, I could remember because the 400 small blocks were problematic because the cylinders were so thin, so they never sealed well, and so they would leak. Sometimes the cylinder walls would crack, and it'd burn oil. So I'd have to go buy these electric spark plugs. They're like, back in the day, they were like $12 a piece. You know, back when you buy a spark plug for like 75 cents. But they lasted. They were electrics, you know, some kind of electric electrode in it, and it burnt the oil. It actually worked. But I would run it with these, you know, I'd have a couple of Champions and some auto lights, and then I had these electric spark plugs in the bad cylinders, you know. And I raced some people at Gandy, and we got to the Tampa side, but I'd have to, after a run, I'd have to change the plugs in order to get it back on the other side, because when I took them home, I'd have to clean them. You know, I didn't really have that much money to be spending on plugs all the time, but And people would come out, you know, and they'd be like going, all right, here's your money for the win. But, you know, you're Gandy Bridge. There's like 100 people standing around you. And they're standing around watching you get the money from the guy. And they're standing around talking, hey, that was a good race. What do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And I go in my trunk. I get a few plugs, wrenches, and spark plugs, and I'm putting them out on the fender. And they're all laughing, going, hey, Joe, man, this guy just beat you with all these mixture of spark plugs, and look, they're all dripping oil. You know, that was funny. You know, that wasn't scripted, so it was just cool how it happened. You know.
Right. Yeah, and then on other funny things that you've told me about street racing was playing the games, reeling people in.
Oh yeah, that was on the first Chevelle. So like when I couldn't go to Gandy Bridge because that's where all the people had jobs and had money. And I was a kid. I was only 16, 17 years old. Those guys out there were married, had houses, you know, and they had money. They had badass fast cars. So I had to stay with Fletcher Park because Fletcher Park is where all the high school kids were. And I could actually race them and make some money. So I would go out there, and there was a guy out there with a Cutlass. And I remember racing him. He actually came to me and asked me to race, and I thought, what the hell? And back then, now you got to remember, this is the 80s, you know, and $20 back then was a lot of money, okay? And so he would say 20 bucks, and I'd be like, all right. So we'd race for $20. And I could remember, you know, watching TV, watching some, you know, movies about street racing and how people would, you know, they're talking about, oh yeah, kind of just play with them and stuff like that. And oh, the guy's talking about let's double or nothing and stuff. And I thought, you know, maybe I could kind of put that into the mix, you know. And how I did it was like the guy which was the first guy I did this with. He was one of the first ones. We'd get on the bridge and we're running heads up. The guy dropped his hands, you know, he point, raise his hands and drop them. And both of us took off. And he went a little bit ahead of me, and I could hear he was spinning. I was spinning too, but he went a little bit ahead, but then I started pulling in front of him. And I only beat him, I guess, by half a car length. And I thought, man, if I could just not spin so bad, I could probably do better. And so I thought maybe instead of doing the burnout, because we're racing off the bridge over the Hillsborough River, and the bridge was concrete, and before the bridge was asphalt. So instead of doing the burnout on the asphalt, because asphalt's got oil in it, and we'd get oil in the tires, and that wouldn't be good news. So I thought maybe I'll do burnout on the street, just get him to do the starting line more on the bridge. And so that's what we did. And so I did the burnout on the bridge, and the guy lined us up, he pointed it out, and this time when I raced him, he didn't get out in front of me, I got out in front of him, and we raced double or nothing. And I told him, I said, man, you know, when we got back, he paid me my money, so now I'm 40 bucks ahead. And he goes, wow, okay, that was good. And I said, hey, listen, man, you know, your tires, I could hear them because, you know, I was going by you, and I could hear the tires are spinning. I wasn't spinning. I think you just didn't do a long enough burnout. I think if you do a longer burnout, okay, I think that you could probably win your money back. He goes, well, I don't know. I don't have $40. I said, well, let's just do it for 20. So between the two of them, they were able to scratch up 10 bucks a piece. And so we went back out there, and we, again, repeating the same thing. This time, because I knew with the car running the way it did, it actually ran and performed a lot better. So I let him get out in front of me a little bit, and then I just drove by him. But as we're going past the finish line, I just kind of edged it just enough because I thought maybe I could get him to get his friends involved. Maybe they'd scratch together some money. Well, that went on, you know, and so they didn't have any more money, but their buddies did. And after I told him in front of his buddies, dude, did you see you were like in front of me and like I barely beat you. How about help you win some of this money back? You can just like maybe half a car length on a hands drop. The dude didn't hesitate. He's like, get me $20 from somewhere.
Where's the ATM?
Yeah. And he was like, we went out there on the bridge, did it again, and I beat him, but when I beat him, I just beat him again. But I didn't think I was going to get any more out of him on this one, because when I got back, he was mad. And he goes, I think you're playing me. I said, I'm just getting lucky. I'm learning this bridge, and I'm learning my car. This is a brand new car for me. I'm learning this, you know. I just so happens you be my first race. And he wasn't happy, and he wouldn't race me again. But I used that same strategy on and on and on, and it worked pretty good. The only problem was that at Fletcher Park there was some faster cars, and they wanted to race, but I was a 16, 17-year-old kid, and these are adults coming to me going, hey, punk, you know, I want you to race me. It's like, dude, I might as well just give you the money, because I'm going to lose. I don't have what you got, nowhere near. This is just a street car. You know, so I didn't race them, but, you know, they weren't happy with it. They wanted easy money, you know, but that was fun.
Right. So, by contrast, what was like the worst thing, or maybe I should even say the scariest situation that you had been in that involves street racing?
I would say the scariest was, one time in my life, I decided, because I had to get to work and I had a suspended driver's license, but I loved racing, so I had to go street racing. And here we are. I made a deal with a guy to run him, heads up, and it was over by the airport. And so we got lined up, and the guy I was racing was brothers with the guy who started us. Now, I almost felt like, there could have been something going on there, but we went ahead and raced. And I was racing that Javelin, and I got out in front. Javelin got behind me because the race was over with. And I'm looking through my rearview mirror, and I see all these lights going behind the Javelin. And I'm thinking, oh, crap. I didn't see no police cars, because I had to drive down there to turn around in order to line the car up at the starting line so we could race. And I didn't see him. He must have been hiding in the woods or something. And man, when I looked through that rearview mirror and I seen the lights going, I was like, I'm done. I got a suspended driver's license. This dude just witnessed me drag racing on the street with this car. I said, this car is going to get impounded. I said, I can't risk that. So stupid me. I pulled it back in low gear, you know, because it's in third, and I pulled it back into second gear because I had a turbo 400. And of course the RPM went through the roof, but that was kind of good because the place was kind of sandy. So when I did that, car kind of started to slide a little bit because I was going too fast actually for second gear, but I did it more because I wanted to go faster, not because of anything else. But I realized I was coming up on West Shore, and I thought, I got to make this turn. I got to go down West Shore, and I got to get fast, because you know he's going to be on the radio, and you can't beat the radio. So I thought, maybe if I could just get fast enough, far enough out, because the guy in the Javelin was slowing down. So because he was slowing down, that was putting distance between me and the cop, because the cop wasn't going around him, because that road was kind of narrow. So he pulls into the parking lot that's at the end of that road that's next to West Shore. Well, I keep going, and I cut the wheel on a hard right, and I slid sideways. Now imagine this. This is a 68 Chevelle with no sway bars, okay? And I'm probably doing about 50 mile an hour, making a right-hand turn. And when I looked out my driver's window, I'm looking at the ground, because this car is like up on its side, and I was freaking out this whole time. And all I could think about is this cop. He's probably on my bumper. What am I going to do? You might as well just give up. That's what I'm thinking. And man, and now the car's like slow. I pull it back into first. I stab it. The car is going sideways. I mean, I'm just like dancing left and right on this car. It's roaring the tires. I'm just hauling ass going down West Shore. And I look at this hotel sitting right there, and I thought, you know what? I don't see no cop. I don't see no lights behind me. I'm going to make a right-hand turn in this hotel. And if I could just get back to the back of the hotel fast enough, he won't find me. If I can park this thing fast enough. So sure enough, there's 2 entrances to this hotel. And I thought, if I don't make the first one, it's okay. I'll make the second one. Well, guess what? The first one is the one that I needed to make because it was wider. I didn't make it because I was going too fast. I only had 4-inch wide tires in the front, and those were locked up. So I'm like, shit, I'll just have to go to the second one. So I pulled it back into second gear because I'm in high gear now. I pull it back into second gear, had that B&M quick click, you know, just imagine that, click, 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 just banging that thing. And I make the right-hand turn, going in through the outdoor. And guess what? That entrance that I was making through the outdoor was narrower. So needless to say, I ended up hitting the curb with my left front rim. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I tore the front suspension out. I bent the hell out of the wheel. So I'm like now I'm upset because I destroyed my car, but still thinking about this cop. I'm looking over my shoulder. I'm hauling ass through this parking lot. I go, man, I can't go this crazy fast because if somebody walks out, I'm going to run them over. So I make this right-hand turn to get in front of the hotel, to go to the back of the hotel. And all these guys, man, they're high-stepping it, trying to get out of my way, you know, because they hear this car just, you know, and I'm hauling ass through that parking lot. I get to the back of the parking lot. Now I'm looking for a parking space. I'm rolling the window down, see if there's any sirens out there. I find an opening. I said, I got to get it in there. So I shoved that car in there, rolled all the windows up, locked the car, got out, and just walking down the parking lot, you know, thinking, what, I got to go somewhere. I got to get away from the car, got to make it look like it's been sitting there for a long time, and I got to walk. But there's no cops anywhere. No sirens going. I was like, what's up with this? Well, off in the distance, because I wasn't that far, the hotel wasn't that far from the corner, and I see all the lights going off in the distance. And I'm like going, wow, there's a lot of cops over there. And I could see through the fence because it was fenced off, and there's a big parking garage right there, which was on that road. And next thing I know, I'm looking over there, and I could see there was like probably 10, 15 cop cars, and they had him up against the car, and I guess they had the cuffs on him, but they ended up impounding his car, taking him to jail. I jumped the fence to get out of the parking lot, and one of the people that were watching the race, I jumped in his truck, and he took me to Burger King, the one I was telling you about that was always swamped with people. He took me to Burger King, and I sat there and waited for, I guess, 3 or 4 hours. Eventually, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. I went and got my car, got in it, drove it home with a bent rim. So, you know, this thing's kind of doing the dance.
Right. But given everything that, you know, we just talked about, and what you know from your collective experience, obviously I don't think you would advocate for anybody to reenact that or anything, but would you do it again, knowing what you know today, looking back? Would you say, yeah, I would still do that?
Well, you say, you know, that was a bad deal, I wouldn't do it. But, you know, when you're young, you're dumb, and you do things because you think you can get away with it, and you think you're invincible, you know. When you're older, you don't take those risks. So that's a tough question, because it's like when you're young, you say, hell yeah, I'll do that again, you know. But when you're older, you're like, that was dumb. A lot of bad things could have happened because rationale starts taking over, and you realize how many negative things could have happened from that. So it was a crazy experience. It was a life experience, but would I do it older? No.
Right. Well, that's definitely interesting, because I know you told me that fights would break out and people would end up dying out there, you know, because people would bring weapons and stuff like that because they'd get mad over a race that they thought they got cheated on or something like that.
Well, cheated. I mean, I could remember at Fletcher Park one night, we were out there racing, and I could remember many nights some people would be fighting. They'd be fighting over somebody cheating or even not wanting to race. I don't want to race, and they'd get in a fight because they felt like, you know, that was the thing to do. And people fought all the time. And even this one guy that was there, which was somebody I'd never seen before, he ended up showing up there. And he got in a fight with one of the guys there at Fletcher Park, and he pulled a knife on him and stabbed him in the stomach. and the guy that got stabbed in the stomach didn't even realize during the fight that he got stabbed. And it was pretty bad. I mean, he was bleeding and everything, and people said, hey, I think something's going on there. You know, you got all this red blood showing up on your pants, and they took him to the emergency room. He was all right, you know, not a big deal, but it's still it could have turned into a bad deal. But that's the problem when you're street racing, you know, it brings out a lot of negatives, you know, and that's the bad thing. And there's a lot of good stuff. I mean, a lot of good people go out there and have fun, you know, but it happens like in everything, you know. Sometimes there's bad involved with good, you know.
Right. What was the turning off point with the second Chevelle where you just kind of said, you know what, I'm not going to do the street racing thing anymore. I'm going to turn this into an actual race car?
Well, I think for me it was, you know, a lot of people were getting arrested. The cops were getting really, really heavy on Gandy Bridge. I remember this guy, Carl. He had a Nova that was, I mean, it looked like a factory driving everyday car with little cheese slicers, and he was outrunning everybody. And the cops grabbed a hold of him and changed his life. And I seen what they put him through and what he ended up going through. It was bad. And some other people wrecked. I seen some wrecks that happened, and that was bad. And I think the big thing that really did it for me was I was watching a race on the Gandy Bridge. And when I realized that, you know, on the bridge, you only got like 2 feet between the rail and that white line that people drive in. And people it'd be like a big arc, and they'd be walking out to the middle of the road because they want to see the cars coming. And they would swing back to that emergency lane as the cars are coming down the track. And I'm talking about like when you're standing there, the rearview mirror, you could reach out and touch the rearview mirror. You know what I'm saying? When these cars go by. And I mean, these things are flying. They're doing like 125 mile an hour, 150 mile an hour in some cases, you know. And I mean, when I was there, I saw that for the first time as a spectator. And I thought, oh my God, if I'm racing down the track or down the street on the bridge and somebody doesn't move quick enough, they're going to get run over. And guess who gets buried under the jail? You know what I mean? Or how about worse? How about the car loses control and the people become bowling pins and the car's the bowling ball? And it wipes out 30 or 40 or 50 people. Because that bridge, the whole side of that bridge would be filled with people because they want to see that race. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is bad news. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And things started changing. They didn't really have anything for the track. There was I wanted heads up. I couldn't bracket race. I just wasn't into bracket racing. And I could see things change where they were doing more heads up stuff. And I think that was the thing that really started getting me to look at the racetrack, because it was more controlled. And that's what I liked, because not only was it controlled, but you didn't have that fear factor of wrecking into people, you know, and that bothered me a little bit. And plus the police, you didn't have to run from the cops.
Right. Well, that's what we'll be covering in the next topic, is going to be the evolution of street racing evolving into the Flowmaster car.